All right, good afternoon. I will start off with a statement from this, on the new UN Office on Counterterrorism. The Secretary General welcomes the adoption today by the General Assembly of a resolution which endorses his proposal to establish a new United Nations Office of Counterterrorism. The Secretary General sincerely thanks the President of the General Assembly for facilitating this consensus resolution and member states for their strong support for this initiative, which constitutes a major reform of the UN counterterrorism architecture. The Secretary General expects the United Nations Counterterrorism Center within the new Office of Counterterrorism to play a central role in the provision of enhanced capacity building assistance to member states. The Secretary General expresses appreciation for the role played by the United Nations Counterterrorism Center Advisory Board in guiding its work and the growing number of member states who are contributing to it. The Secretary General considers counterterrorism and prevention of violent extremism to be one of the highest priorities of the United Nations to address a growing threat to international peace and security. He therefore hopes that this reform of the UN counterterrorism architecture will contribute to the UN's broader efforts to promote conflict prevention, sustainable peace, and development. That statement is online. From Somalia, the Special Representative of the Secretary General, Michael Keating, today condemned in the strongest possible terms last night's attack on the Pizza House restaurant and posh hotel in Mogadishu, which reportedly killed at least 19 people. Mr. Keating said there was no justification for such an act of wanton bloodshed, which was clearly aimed at civilians who were breaking their Ramadan fast. He added that the holy month of Ramadan is a time of peace and compassion, and the attackers have shown cynical contempt for this and set back the prospect for a peaceful solution to Somalia's problems. The chef de cabinet, Maria Luisa Ribeiro Viotti, today briefed the Security Council on the Secretary General's report on options for authorization and support for the African Union peace support operations. She told Council members we should move away from ad hoc arrangements. The report, she noted, presents proposal for institutionalized approaches to joint planning and mandating, financing, and supporting African Union peace support operations. She added that predictable approaches are required as the United Nations African Union Partnership has been and will be the preferred modality for pursuing peace and security in Africa. Her remarks are available in my office. And from Colombia, the beginning of the second phase of the arms laydown process in that country, corresponding to an additional 30% of arms, took place yesterday in the zone for normalization with the participation of the chief of the UN mission, Jean Arnaud. At the end of this second phase of the laying down of weapons process, the UN has now in its custody about 40% of the approximately 7,000 individual weapons that were registered, monitored, and verified by the mission since March 1st of this year in the 26 transitional local zones for normalization and transitory points. The UN mission in Colombia encourages the party to continue their commitment to comply with the 29th May roadmap, and in particular in regard to the ceasefire and laying down of weapons. And our colleagues at the UN mission in the Central African Republic say that a convoy its peacekeepers escorted came under fire yesterday from suspected anti-Balaka elements near Mobai in Baskoto Prefecture, with one peacekeeper sustaining minor injuries. Also in the area, presumed anti-Balaka elements destroyed a key bridge connected to the town and the airport. The mission has increased patrols specifically around settlement housing displaced people. As part of its conflict prevention efforts in the local level, the mission continues to facilitate talks between anti-Balaka leaders of the Bosangoa and representatives of the FPRC in Guam Prefecture ahead of the peace talks between the two groups. The goal of the planned talks is for both parties to agree on the free and safe movements of people between the two communities, as well as to foster local cohesion and peaceful cohabitation in the region. And our colleague, Jamie McGoldrick, the UN Humanitarian Coordinator for Yemen, said today that the man-made humanitarian crisis in Yemen is resulting in famine-like conditions and unprecedented spread of cholera. There are more than 140,000 suspected, half of them children, and nearly 1,000 associated deaths, all of which could have been prevented. Mr. McGoldrick warned that humanity is losing to politics and called on the parties to the conflict to end tactics which inflict suffering on the Yemeni people and contribute to the collapse of critical services, especially in the health sector. More than 1 million civil servants have not been paid for nearly a year. Since the beginning of the year, 2 million more people are in need of humanitarian assistance and protection, pushing the total past 20 million. On average, 4 million people have received food assistance each month since the beginning of the year, but funding is running out. Unless donors provide fresh funds in the food pipeline is at risk of breaking in September, and the prospects of famine will be a reality. Of the $2.1 billion required for the Yemen response plan, it's only 29% funded. And members of the Commission of Inquiry on Burundi today gave their second oral briefing to the Human Rights Council. Members said that their initial fears concerning the scope and gravity of human rights violation and abuses in the country since April of 2015 have been confirmed. Since the beginning of its investigation, the Commission has collected more than 470 testimonies of human rights violations allegedly committed in Burundi since April of 2015. These include extrajudicial killings, acts of torture and other inhumane and degrading treatment, sexual and gender-based violence, arbitrary arrest and detention, as well as enforced disappearances. More information is available online. And yesterday, the Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, briefed member states on the UN's two-track approach to help people of Haiti as they deal with the outbreak of cholera there. She said the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, is strongly committed to taking forward the new approach. However, he needs full support of the membership to do so. The UN action requires member state action. She said we cannot fail the people of Haiti at this critical moment, and we cannot leave Haiti behind. Her speech was released yesterday. And our colleagues at the UN country team in Bangladesh said they remain concerned about the loss of lives, livelihoods, and damage to homes and infrastructure in the country's southeast following mudslides that killed more than 150 people. Those mudslides are said to be among the deadliest in the country's recent history and are attributed in part to environmental degradation caused by unregulated deforestation and a growing population. UN agencies are working with authorities to assess the impacts and respond to the needs. And UNICEF issued its latest report card measuring sustainable development goals for children in high-income countries. It found that while most of these countries have seen drops in the rates of child mortality, adolescent suicide, teenage births, and drunkenness, they're still far from delivering on the vision held out by the SDGs. Income inequality is growing, the mental health of adolescents is getting worse, and child obesity is on the rise. And according to our friends at the World Intellectual Property Organization, Switzerland, Sweden, Netherlands, US, and the UK have been ranked the world's most innovative countries according to their 2017 Global Innovation Index, which was released today. Key findings this year show the rise of India as an emerging innovation center in Asia, as well as countries like Kenya and Vietnam, who are outpacing their peers. And today is World Elder Abuse Day. This year's theme is Understanding and Ending Financial Abuse of Older People, a human rights issue. The theme underscores that older people have a right to a life of dignity in old age, free from all forms of abuse, including financial and material exploitation, which could lead to poverty, hunger, and homelessness, and even premature mortality. To mark the day, the World Health Organization released a study where it says that around 1 in 6 older people experience some form of abuse. This can be physical, psychological, financial, or simply neglect. WHO says the figure is higher than previously estimated and is predicted to rise as the world's population ages. And I just want to flag an event at 1 p.m. in the UN Bookshop. The author Dan Plesch, the director of the Center for International Studies and Diplomacy at the University of London, will be discussing his latest book, Human Rights After Hitler, The Lost History of Prosecuting Axis War Crimes. And he'll have a discussion with the UN Assistant Secretary General for Human Rights, Andrew Gilmore. The book examines the work of the UN War Crimes Commission, which helped prosecute Axis war criminals in Europe and East Asia before and after the trials of Nuremberg and the trials in Tokyo, and that's open to you, and it's 1 o'clock in the bookshop. And tomorrow we'll be joined by John Ging from OCHA. He'll brief you on his recent mission to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, as well as the Central African Republic. Ms. Lederer.
Steph, 2 questions. With the adoption of the GA resolution on counterterrorism, can we expect the Secretary General sometime very soon to be announcing a new UN Under-Secretary General for Counterterrorism? And secondly, Israel's UN mission put out a statement this morning accusing the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for West Africa of putting out another anti-Israeli report, this one accusing Israel's security forces of using disproportionate force against Palestinians and in some cases of extrajudicial executions, and they are calling for the UN to withdraw this report. Is the UN going to take any action on that?
I'm not aware of any action being planned on the report. I assume you mean the Economic Commission for Western Asia. Yeah, Asia. Yeah, it's okay. That's all right. Yes, yes. No, I'm not aware of any decision to be taken on that particular report. On your first question, yes, we can now. The adoption by the General Assembly opens the door for the naming of head of the new counterterrorism architecture. My years of experience here have given me the advice not to qualify the time frame for that appointment, but I know it is underway. Sarah, then Matthew.
Thank you. On Turkey, does the SG have a comment on the arrest and illegal imprisonment of United Nations Judge Aydin Sifa Akay?
Yes. We're aware of the conviction of Judge Akay, who, as you know, is a judge in the International Residual Mechanism for the Criminal Tribunal and International of Turkey by criminal court in first instance in Ankara. The Secretary General welcomes Judge Akay's provisional release following the decision. The Secretariat will continue to engage with the relevant authorities with respect of the issue around Mr. Akay's immunity, though we have not yet received a copy of the judgment. Matthew.
I wanted to ask you about the presentation yesterday about the new approach to the UN's role in cholera in Haiti. Two things. I saw David Navarro there, and I wanted to ask you. I know that he ran for WHO. Is he back as a UN official? Amina Mohammed said that the Secretary General will soon be naming a high-level envoy. Maybe you won't give a time frame, but what's the process? I guess I haven't seen it advertised.
It will be the Secretary General. I think is considering a number of people, and he will appoint the person he best sees fit. As you know, not every high-level position is posted on the Secretary General's website. Some he chooses to do that with, others he does not. But he's obviously consulting with member states and trying to find the best possible person. And hopefully we'll have that announcement sooner rather than later.
And Mr. Navarro, did he just return to his special end? What's his post?
I believe he's returned to a post that he had. I'm not aware of the exact details.
And just one last final thing on returns. It was said when the Secretary General took off on his trip that he would be back in New York the morning of Thursday, 15 June. So I'm looking at that announcement is still what qualifies as his daily schedule.
Yes, he landed.
He's
landed. He landed very early this morning, and I hope for his sake that he's resting at home. But he's in New York. Rosalind and Abdelhamid.
Sure. Follow up on Haiti. The DSG's comments yesterday raised some concerns with some NGOs. They're concerned that the UN may be backing away from the victim assistance in the form of direct compensation and instead establishing community development projects. Is that accurate? Is the UN, as these critics are suggesting, breaking its word with those who were infected with cholera during the peacekeeping?
No, the UN is not breaking its word. I think we are following exactly the new approach that was laid out. The track 2, if I'm not mistaken, talks about initially looking at community-based approaches, and there's been no change in our approach. Abdelhamid.
Thank you. I have a few questions. First, on Saif al-Islam, since he was released from prison, the UN did not issue any statement. I know ICC is asking for his arrest, but why the UN itself did not issue any statement?
I don't have any specific thing to say right at this point on that release.
Okay. The second question, what would be the relations between the Center of Countering Terrorism headed by Jahangir Khan and the new office of the Undersecretary General? Would it incorporate the center?
It'll be subsumed into.
So it will
yes,
be.
yes.
It will become
That's the whole point is about.
It's not a Saudi finance center now.
The whole point is to bring coherence in all the different entities and coordination that deal with counterterrorism.
Yeah.
Ben.
Yeah. Last week, the Saudis and 3 other countries sanctioned several people and institutions. One institution was the Qatar charity. Just wondering, do you have an update on that, given that the Qatar charity has many dealings with different UN agencies?
I think we address this issue. We, as a matter of principle and a matter of rule, the sanctions lists that the UN abides by are the ones that are produced by the UN, various intergovernmental bodies of the UN. Our colleagues at OCHA have worked with the specific Qatari organization in coordinating and delivering aid in various places. I think, including in Syria and Iraq. We do not fund them, and we do not receive funds from them. But they've been a partner in implementing a number of projects.
Partner.
That I've heard of no change in our relationship with them.
Have the Saudis or the other countries that put them on the list, have they contacted the Secretary General, giving reasons why?
I'm not aware of anything besides what's been said publicly. Matthew.
Sure. Some other things, but just on Qatar, they've announced that they're pulling out of their role on the border between Djibouti and Eritrea, which is something the UN has worked on in the past, and it seems pretty clearly tied to this standoff with the other Gulf countries. Do you have any comment on that? Do you anticipate Qatar pulling back from the role it's played in Darfur? Or is there any interplay between these diplomatic initiatives, and in the case of Djibouti and Eritrea, the actual imposition of troops between 2 belligerents?
No specific comment on the issue between Ethiopia and Eritrea. I mean, I think as we've said, the Secretary General has been following this closely. He's been in touch with various parties, including the Deputy Prime Minister of Kuwait, and is very much supportive of Kuwait's diplomatic efforts. I think it's important that the sub-region regains its unity. The disunity we're seeing, it serves no one.
Just Djibouti. I just wanted to be clear. I'm asking about Eritrea.
Eritrea. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Just
I
to be.
misspoke. Yeah.
And the other thing is, I've seen an email from Michael Moeller to the staff in Geneva, basically telling them don't do a work stoppage. But the sentence in it I wanted to ask you rather than Mr. Moeller about is it says, based on guidance from UNHQ, staff are reminded that actions such as work stoppage or other collective action may be considered as unauthorized absence in line with staff regulations and rules. And the staff union says they are fully within their rights under their own Article 16, which was approved by the Office of Legal Affairs to do a work stoppage, and that they. So I wanted to know, what would you say? One, what is the UNHQ or the Secretary General's position on the rights of workers for collective action? And do you have any? I guess do you have any comment to?
No, I haven't seen. Mr. Mueller didn't copy me on the email, so I haven't. I haven't. I don't work in Geneva, unfortunately. We're obviously. I think our colleagues in Geneva are taking very seriously the actions proposed by the staff union, and we'd encourage people to follow the staff rules and regulations. Linda.
Thank you, Steph. Going back to Yemen. You mentioned how the famine, which is so serious and is affecting about 20 million people, which is a very high portion of the population. You also mentioned that only 29% of the appeal is funded. I was wondering who the major donors are. I mean, are members of the coalition and neighbors, Gulf states, et cetera, contributing, their fair share?
I believe they what amounts to a fair share is a judgment that we'll let others make. What is important is that the humanitarian appeal be funded at a much higher percentage. We can ask our colleagues at OCHA to give us the breakdown of who contributed to the appeal. But you know, we've had, I think, whether what I've said from here or the guests we've brought on, I think we cannot underscore enough the criticality of the humanitarian situation in Yemen, which is, as everybody said, a man-made disaster and happening in front of cameras and for everyone to see. Abdelhamid.
Thank you again. Following the adoption of a resolution in the GA raising the status of Palestine from an observer organization to an observer state, there was an agreement signed between the UN and the PA during a visit by former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon to Ramallah. This agreement says that the UN must deal with Palestine as the state of Palestine in every dealings. Now, is the UN in violation of that agreement when they pull out the state of Palestine from this vacancy announcement about the East?
Were you talking about UNOPS?
Yeah.
Well, I think you're mixing oranges and olives here. It's clear that the status of Jerusalem is a final status issue that needs to be negotiated between the parties. I do not think that it has anything to do with the status of the state of Palestine as an observer in this organization. Matthew.
I wanted to ask you again about the Al Rif region of Morocco, because since I last asked, sentences have been imposed on a number of the protesters, a year and a half to 25 people, 6 months to 5 people. And French President Macron was in Rabat and said that King Mohammed VI, I don't know if that's translated right, stood ready to assuage the issues of Al Rif. So I'm just wondering if it's now viewed as international in that way. Does the UN have no guidance at all? What about year-and-a-half sentences to peaceful protesters? Is that something that...
I'm not aware of the details of the particular case. As I said, when we have something to say, we shall. Thank you.